Hi guys, and welcome to episode 6 of the Budget Scrambler build. So last time we got some nice looking race plates done and some sturdy grippy foot pegs. Today I'm going to be looking at making a new brake pedal and also a stump guard. Right, so I want to start off by making a new brake pedal. If you look at this one, it's huge, it's hideous. I can't see any reason for it being that long, and I want to make a nicer looking one that's going to match the foot pegs and the gussets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some 4mm sheet metal, cut a shape out, drill it, bend it, and then I'm going to reinforce it with some steel bar welded across the bottom. Okay, so I'm in the middle of making the brake lever that I want to replace this one. Now, I've made it out of flat bar because I had that in the offcuts. I've also bent it so that it will avoid the footrests. This one is really low slung and has a lot of weird bends in it, but that's actually to clear the exhaust. Now we have a high level exhaust, there's absolutely no need for that. So what I'm going to do now is cut this off here, clean that all up, and then ready it for welding my one on there. Okay, so I've cleaned up my little pivot now, and I've just been over to the bike and I've chalked on where I'd like to weld it. So I'm going to go ahead and tack it. Then I'm going to test fit it again. So important to test fit things. Otherwise you end up doing them and they don't fit and you've got to redo everything again. So I'm going to test fit it, and then after that I imagine I'll have to do a little bit more bending, and I'll start working out where I want to go with the grip. So I've done my test fitting and I've done my welding. I've gone to town on the welding and made it pretty sturdy, because we mustn't forget this is responsible for the back brake, and while some people might not want their girlfriend to have a good back brake, I do. So we've got to make sure it's not going to break, which it's not. On lining it up, I can see that I'm going to need to add an extra bend. So that's what this chalk mark is about. I'm going to take it over to the vise and use the scroll dogs to bend it again. And I will just keep working it until it sits right. So those of you with a keen eye will notice that these are not the same bends from the last video. It didn't quite work out, so I made it flat again on the anvil, and I've just rebent it to a position where everything clears nicely, and this is in a sensible position for Ellie's foot. The next thing is going to be mounting somewhere for our foot to contact. So usually on trail bikes you have really grippy ones and they're quite small, but personally I don't get along with them. I prefer the sort of thing that comes on the bike stock. So we're going to go with personal preference, and I'm going to use the original plate. So I'm going to cut that off, clean it up, weld it on. Then we should have a functioning brake pedal. But I'd like to take it one step further. One, for strength, it's probably unnecessary, but two, it looks really cool. So I'm going to take some round bar and I'm going to run it all the way along here and weld that in. Should look pretty cool. So I've just finished up on the brake pedal, and I can't lie to you, I'm pretty disappointed with it. It hasn't come out how I saw it in my mind at all, but that's sometimes the way. Fortunately, because of the way it works, it is much more hidden than the original one, so you won't be able to see a lot of it anyway, and it functions perfectly, so that's all that matters really. Once it's painted up black, I think it'll be okay. So the only thing left to do now is go and fit it. So I've just gone and fitted the brake pedal, and I stood back and I've looked at it after being so disappointed, and I've actually decided I quite like it. It looks pretty cool against the foot pegs, seeing that weld, so actually I'm glad I did that, and I'm pleased with how it's come out. Now, when it comes through the painting, I don't know whether I will actually leave them raw or just clear coat them, I don't know, but I quite like the way they look, so we'll have to see how they marry up against the rest of the paintwork. But overall, I'm pleased. Okay, so now we're going to be moving on to making the bash guard or stump guard. This is quite important on this bike because it's actually a stressed member frame, which means there are no frame rails that run underneath the engine. So that basically will expose the engine to anything we might hit underneath instead of it hitting the frame. So yeah, this is quite important. So I've made this little cardboard template here. The next thing I'm going to do is flatten it out and transfer it to sheet metal. After that, I'll be able to cut it out with the plasma cutter, and then I can start bending it, and then I'll be able to weld it up. Right, so I've cut out the rough shape using a plasma cutter. The reason I use the plasma cutter is because we're running really low on slitting discs, so I thought I'd preserve some. Anyway, I've now chalked out the lines I want to bend, so I'm going to take it over to the fly press and I'm going to start creasing it. So I've made my creases on the fly press now and we've got a basic shape. I've obviously made a couple of mistakes whilst measuring because there are a couple of overhangs, but I can trim them off later. Next I need to tackle this piece. This part here will actually protect the sump of the engine, so it's very important, but it's a little bit flimsy. So I'm going to take it over to the bead roller and I'm going to roll a couple of beads in there because that will give it a lot of rigidity. After that I'm going to tack weld it so that these folds can't flex or move, and then I can start working on the mounts for the front. Okay, so I've been across with the bead roller and I've just put a bead into there. So you can see now it's nice and stiff, it's not going anywhere, much more rigid. I've also tacked these points here and trimmed down the edges where I made a mistake measuring. So next up I need to attach it. So I've had a look around and I've determined that the best points to attach it are the pivot point for the centre stand, and also the front engine mounting plates have a position where I can weld in some lugs. So I'm going to make up 4 lugs and I'm going to do that the same way as how I made the lugs for the front mudguard. So I'm just going to take some steel to the lathe, drill it out and tap a thread. Okay, so I've got my 4 mounts here. These are angled so that they will suit the angled section of the bash plate, and these ones are rounded on the back because they'll be mounting to the tube for the centre stand. So the next thing to do is to drill our mounting holes in the bash plate, and then I'm going to mock these up. I'll be able to tack weld them on the frame before going in and doing the final welding. So I've welded all my lugs and this is nice and stable now. So the next thing I'm going to do is move on to using the Dimple dies. So for that I'm going to need to drill some holes into here. So I've already marked them out and I've centre punched them. So next off I'm going to take them over to the drill and drill them out. Now how these things work is basically you want to be drilling a hole that this is going to fit inside of. Then you'll pop that through and that will meet on the other side. Then you'll squish it together. So you can actually do this with a nut and bolt, but I'm going to do it with the fly press because we've got one and it's way quicker and easier. But that will make it look a lot cooler, and I'm going to use varying sizes as well. Okay, so I've been through and I've dimple dyed everywhere I wanted to do. Obviously I talked about doing it in the fly press, but then I remembered how awkward it was to actually drill those holes. So what I went for was the bolt and the impact driver. That's whacked them up nice and tight, and now they're rigid and they look really cool. So next up I'm going to take it over to the bike, fit it, and then I can stand back and enjoy the fruits of my labour. So our bash guard is all fitted now, and I'm really pleased with how it looks. It gives a nice sharp angle to the front, and also the holes and the dimple dies mirror up against the foot pegs and the brake pedal really well. So we're starting to get more of a Scrambler look to it now. But that's it for episode 6. Join me in episode 7 when I'm going to start putting on some lights. Thanks for watching.